I would give up every Everest summit and Emmys. I've written 106 books now. I'd give them all up in a heartbeat.
Can Jesus be watered down? Does he give us that option?
2,000 years we've sanitized Jesus, made him smiley, white, muscular Jesus.
People are looking for something different to the kind of very tame life we've almost created for ourselves very often in the West.
Elvis was amazing. Some of his impersonators are a little weird. And I think the church is a little like that. A very poor reflection of the king.
It does feel a bit, Bear, like you've been wearing your faith on your sleeve a bit more.
What I decided long ago was that I'm just going to try and do what Jesus did.
What has the wildness taught you about the nature of God? Welcome. You are listening to another episode of Re-Enchanting, the podcast brought to you by Seen and Unseen. I am Belle Tinsel.
And I'm Justin Briley.
And we're discussing our very favourite topic, re-enchantment, and wondering whether the Christian story is a place where we can find such a thing.
Today, we're joined by Bear Grylls. He's an adventurer, a survival expert, and he's become known to millions, of course, through his TV shows, documentaries, and writing. His most recent book is The Greatest Story Ever Told, an account of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, but told through the eyes of 5 eyewitnesses. Today, we're going to be talking to Bear about his own life and faith journey and the inspiration behind this new project as we attempt to re-enchant the story of Jesus.
It's nice to be with you guys. Well done. And what a great job you guys always do.
Oh,
yeah.
Bless you.
I love Justin and me have followed each other on social media for a while, and you've always been so sweet and so encouraging. Just at sort of lovely times and often tricky times, you've often sent encouraging messages. That's so nice to do something virtually in person.
Well, we wish it could be in person. We tried to make it happen, but diaries just didn't align this time round. But maybe next time. So good to have you. But Belle, we always have our signature question.
Oh, it's always the same. I think there'd be uproar if ever we changed it. So our signature question.
Oh no, what is it?
I know. Are you ready? It's big and it's deep. What are you reading? It's a nice start. What are you reading at the moment?
You guys are so nice. That could be a horrible question.
It could be, couldn't it?
That's why I like doing things like this. What am I reading? I'm reading The Wager. Do you know The Wager? Really good book. It's a proper old school adventure yarn, true story of sailors on the high seas, of death, cannibalism, horror, survival, storms, piracy. And that's just in the first chapter. So yeah, The Wager's great. I'm really
not for the faint-hearted, is what I'm sensing.
It's great, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a very appropriate book for Bear Grylls to be reading somehow. Is that kind of what you normally turn to for fun and entertainment, sort of high adventure?
I'm a slow reader, and I read just before going to bed. And I if it's more than a few pages, I'm like done, So I like those sort of books, and it's kind of written as a thriller. And I don't know, Shara, my wife, is amazing. She plows through books. She reads on a Kindle. She just devours them, and she's on about sort of 15-to-1 ratio.
Wow.
But I don't know, maybe in life you don't have to be the best or the fastest. You just got to keep going. I like doggedly keep going, through one eye open. I got to reach the end of this page, let alone this chapter. But it's why when I wrote, Greatest Story, it's why I really wanted to write it for idiots like me. I wanted to write it so it was super accessible, really easy. You rip through it. It's a cliffhanger every 2 or 3 pages. No chapter is longer than that. And actually already we just had so many messages actually saying this about just how, even today from a guy who runs a bookshop, and there was a really sweet message. He goes, everyone thinks I'm a really good reader, but actually I'm really quite dyslexic and really struggle with reading and daren't tell anyone because, and he goes, but I've never devoured a book like this.
Wow.
And thank you for making it easy to read. But it's motivated because that's how I struggle sometimes.
No, I agree. Because we were given this book like a few days ago, and I was like, oh no, how am I going to get through this? And I sped through it. I think those short little chapters, they're almost like little essays. I think that's the key. I think you've hit upon a genius strategy there.
Well, you're so sweet. It's so nice to hear that you ripped through it. It's kind of good. We're doing something right. Come on.
It's a sign of a good book. If you can get through it in one sitting, it means it's kept your attention, you know. So now, before we turn to the book itself, which we want to obviously go into some depth on, obviously many people know you from your hugely popular survival TV shows and whatnot, but it does feel a bit, Bear, like you've been wearing your faith on your sleeve a bit more in recent years. I mean, any sort of sense of why that is? Is it just you feel the time is now, or you've always done it? It's just people are taking more notice now. What do you think?
I think the answer is things I've always had a faith. This is not something new. You know, if you speak to our boys who are now teenagers and the eldest is 21, you know, he'll say, you've knelt beside my bed and said your prayers with me every night of my life growing up. You know, it's always been there. It's always been sort of personal and actually quiet, and it's like full of moments of doubt and struggle, you know. But I think what's happened now is I get asked a lot more about it. That is just the simple truth, is I get asked all the time about it, and I don't know whether that's just what's going on in the world. I don't know. There's just like seems everybody's intrigued. Everybody's looking for what gives you strength, what gives you power, what gives you peace, what gives you kind of that sense of belonging and home. And it's like many people spend a lot of time searching in places that time and history repeatedly says is not going to bring you a happy heart, you know. But that searching is in all of us. And I know I just get asked a lot about it at the moment. And if I'm asked, I'm happy to say, well, you know, this is what's helped me. And it's just truth. You know, I'm not saying I've sort of got it all together, but I'm just saying it's what's helped me. And I think there's a great hunger out there at the moment for things like this.
Was it something that was always just there from childhood, or would you say that it kind of came to life at some point, you know, in your life in a new way?
Yeah, I always had a really natural faith as a young kid. It was like I knew there was something out there, and it was good, and it was love, and it was light, and it was free, and it was beautiful. And I couldn't really articulate it as a young child, even like that. But it's just like it definitely wasn't rooted in church or anything, and it was just like I knew there was more. And then I went to school, and then at school we had to go to, it was, you know, chapel, and it was like every day, and half of it was in Latin. Most of the time the sort of vicars would wear these big white like dresses, and I just thought as a teenager, I've really got it wrong, you know. I just really thought I got it wrong. That's not actually, this is what faith is, and it's quite judgy. Often the people who were giving me a hard time were actually the people who were calling themselves Christians, and always looking quite disapproving. And I just thought I've got it wrong. That's all I thought. And then I remember when I was about 15 or 16, and somebody very close to me died, who was like my godfather. He was like a second father, really, to me. He was my dad's best friend. Spent so much time together, always growing up, when I was growing up. And out of the blue, young, he died of a heart attack. And I just remember being really, really sad. And I remember going down the end of the school grounds and finding this tree. And I always loved climbing trees, still do, to be honest. And I climbed up this tree, and I just remember crying and crying. And it's not something teenage boys really kind of did, you know. And I just remember saying, I wish you were real, like I knew you when I was younger. I wish that was real. You know, I wish that was like, I wish you were there. If you are there, be with me, you know. And it didn't have an amen or anything. But actually, I look back, and that is the only prayer you ever need to say in your life, really. I mean, it's why I love the story of the thief on the cross next to Christ. You know, he never said any prayer of salvation, a sort of formal sort of 3-point prayer about sort of acknowledge your this, and he'd never taken a Eucharist or set his foot inside he wouldn't know the white cassock of it. And but he just through his pain and blood and torture and suffering on death's door, he cried to Jesus, remember me. And it's like, it's a cry of the heart, isn't it? So, but nothing dramatic for me happened. It wasn't like any thunderbolts. It was like from small acorns, oaks grow. And I don't know, it's ever since, it's always been that. It's been a light in my life. And like I say, I don't probably go to church as much as I should, or if that even is a thing. But I know Christ is with me, and it's where my hope and confidence and strength and peace, community and connection comes from. A few great friends, and those simple prayers with my family in the evening, and like I say, there's struggles, there are ups and downs. It's not always together and perfect and easy, but through it all, it's those words I always come back to, of light to a dark path, strength through a failing body. And I don't want to live without that. I don't want to live without that.
Can I ask, because there's such a there's a bit of a vibe shift happening. I'm hearing lots of people talk about this idea of like rewilding and God being a wild God, and this idea that we don't want to tidy him up, we don't want to order him or organize him, we want him to be uncontainable and uncontrollable, all of this. And so if there's anyone I want to ask this question to, it's you, because what has the wildness, like the physical wildness that you found yourself in, and the adventure and the natural world, what has that taught you about the nature of God, and how does your faith look in those places?
Well, you're so right. We love as humans to contain everything and box everything. It's happened to Christianity over 2,000 years.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure the word Christianity existed when Jesus walked the earth. He didn't care for that. He cared for people. But we like to have a name for things. We like to have a folder for things and a routine for things, and it's human nature. But the Spirit of the Almighty, if it's real, is not containable. It's free. It's unquantifiable, and it's I don't know. I think we lose that at our peril. And I think ultimately that becomes all about control, when we don't understand something. I mean, it's interesting. Look at how climbing evolved over the years. Mountains are always fearful, wonderful, scary, powerful, intimidating places. That juxtaposition that you approached at your peril. They were always like over there. And then in the sort of 18th century, sort of Brits started to go to the Alps and started to climb, and then it wanted to kind of control it. And I think it's sort of in our nature. We want to kind of conquer things, but actually, you spend enough time in the mountains, you realize, you go full circle. You realize actually these things are unconquerable, and we are but specks, and they were untamable, and actually they're never about calling them anything or putting a summit on a flag on anything. It's about what it brings out in our hearts. And I think faith is like that. We like to label, we like to try and box, we like to say, I'm this sort of person of faith, I'm an Episcopalian sort of whatever. And it's like, I don't think, I mean, I don't want to put words in God's mouth, but I don't think I kind of think that he doesn't really care about that. He cares about our human hearts. And right in this story of Jesus, at every turn, that was all he cared about, was people's hearts. And I don't know, little things like, so interesting that the first person he chooses to reveal his divinity to, his on earth, he's 30 years old. First person he chooses to actually say, okay, here we go, the mission begins, and to say, this is who I really am. I am the Son of God. Yeah. God Almighty is in your presence right now, which in itself is an insane kind of thing. Is that woman at the well in Samaria, the filthy, dirty, sort of beyond hope, the outcasts, the aliens, the sort of, the untrustworthy, the rule breakers, the unreliable, and but that's not a one-off. All the way through the story, it was like this. The first people that see the baby, it's not the wise men like we always think in this nativity. It's the outcasts again. It's the shepherds, the people at that time of year wouldn't even be allowed into town because they're trying to get everything clean and ready for Passover. And you've got all these shepherds and they're dirty and they're bringing, so I like that. And we must never lose that spirit, and
Yeah.
2,000 years we've sanitized Jesus, made him white, Western, sort of meek and mild, and Christmas.
Yeah.
And actually through this story, at every turn, he was the wild one, the rule breaker, the rule fulfiller, the kind of the maverick, the topsy-turvy. Even those closest to him, he kept turning everything on his head at every turn. It's not what they expected, and they tear their hair out. But it was beautiful. And I've always tried to keep that spirit in my faith and not let it kind of get too boxed.
I love that. And I think with, as Belle says, this kind of rewilding almost, in the sense that people are looking for something different to the kind of very tame life we've almost created for ourselves very often in the West, to the very safe life. That's part of where I see this interest, this renewed interest that Belle talked about in faith. And there's been some really interesting sort of signs of that recently, this quiet revival research. I've been talking about a surprising rebirth of belief in God. You kindly did a little blurb for my book on that when it came out. But the what I'm seeing there, I wonder if that's reflected in, the conversations you're having. I think the book itself that you've written for this is very much for this moment, the greatest story ever told. I think people are ready to hear the story again. So I just love the fact that you've produced a book that does exactly that. And before we kind of go into the details of the book, I just wondered, are you seeing that in your everyday life and your peers in the kind of film and entertainment industry? Are they kind of showing a different kind of interest in faith, God, Jesus, that kind of thing?
I think so. I think there's a resurgence. I think spirituality is, people realize if you're going to be a strong human being, we're not just physical, we're not just emotional, we're not just mental. Spiritual is an element. People are hungry for spirituality. I don't think they're necessarily hungry for what a lot of the church has offered. I think we've failed in so many ways like that, but that's okay. But we're hungry. People are hungry for spirituality and life and light and meaning and purpose, pride and community and strength and bonds together and something with the Almighty. And we must always, all of us, keep showing people to the light and the real stuff, and that the rest can follow. The window dressing can follow. I always kind of think it's a bit like Elvis. Elvis was amazing. Some of his impersonators are a little weird, And I think the church is a little like that, Elvis. And you just got to keep pointing people to the King, keep pointing people to the King. And you can't judge the King on some of the I don't know if you spend much time. I spend a lot of time in the States. I see Elvis impersonators everywhere. 99% of them absolutely terrible, like a very poor reflection of the King. You've got to keep pointing people towards the King, I suppose. And I think the wild, Matt, just to answer your question properly, Bella, is, so many times in the jungle, up mountains, a million miles from any institution, those have been my moments of like, I know you are real. I don't have those moments all the time, and I struggle with just as many moments of doubt. But the times they've come to me, and it's not only out there, but the times have come to me, I remember once in a jungle, South America, like as far away from human people as I've ever been, and I've been to some crazy places over the years. So dense you can't see your hand in front of your face, just through just disgusting swamp and mud and thistles and like thorns. And sort of, looking down at one point, seeing this flower, and it was just like this unbelievable flower, and it's like, it was like, and just thinking, that is like, nobody's ever going to see this. Nobody's ever going to see, that to me is like moments of God's extravagance of like, and there's so much pain in the world. There's so much bad stuff. but we live in this world where it's sort of good and bad and light and dark. But those moments of light are so beautiful, and they're often as well in connection with friendships and beautiful moments of unseen kindnesses. And, but those moments of light are so great. And I think for all of us, we've got to stay hopeful, and keep looking at that, and feed people where they are hungry. Where, as you say, if people are hungry for share the good stuff. And that's all I really hope for the greatest story ever told. I don't want to share religion. Nobody's hungry for religion. Aged 13 up that tree, I wasn't hungry for religion. I just wanted to know he was real, and he was beside me and was good and would help. And the storms might still be there, but you're still with me. And that's all I want to share through this book, really, because it is amazing. I mean, it's like, it's not like I should have called it maybe the greatest story ever told, or could be. I actually really thought about it. I thought, hold on, is this wrong to call it definitively? Even the publishers questioned me on it. They were going like, and it was like, I knew if this is true, there's not even a close second. You will never get a greater story than this in terms of love, sacrifice, friendship, freedom, hope. It's kind of there, and that's what I want to share.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so let's dig into the book, because it's so rich, and I really want to dig into the way you've written it, because it was a bold way to write it. So what you've done is you've told the greatest story ever told, but you've done it through like the eyewitness accounts of 5 different characters, 5 people who were in Jesus's orbit, right? And you write it like in the first person, so you write it from their perspective. And I was like, oh man, this is a brave way to tell the story of Jesus. And then what's so beautiful about that is you see how their hearts react to him, exactly like everything you've just said. You see how Jesus meets them, and he changes them from the inside out. He turns them upside down, or right side up rather. And there's this beautiful, I read a bit in the hairdressers, right? And I was crying in the hairdressers. It's Peter, although you give them their regional names, and we'll ask you about that in a moment. But Peter, he's seen Jesus walk on the water, and he wants to go out and join him. And he says this line where he just says, I think subconsciously I felt that it would be the safest place to be. And I was in the hairdressers with foils in my hair, like, oh, Jesus, you're so kind. So thank you for that.
I feel it when people send me lines like that or read. Instantly, I feel my things go as well. It's like,
yeah.
The reason I wanted to do it from these different perspectives is that they're all of our stories.
Yeah.
That's the thing, that, all of our own stories, wherever somebody is wrapped up in this book, whether we're the cynic or the skeptic or the broken, desperately in need of healing, or, or the raw and the angry, or the nervous and the innocent. It's like all there. And it's like, actually, when you say that, it's like so interesting that every single one of them has that journey. Even Mary at the beginning, like, this can't be real, through to that sort of beautiful, quiet, assured confidence at the end, where she's nudging him to begin at the wedding again, and nudging him, And even when he says to her, it's not my turn. No, I'm basically saying, I'm enjoying this party. I'm having a good time. And she doesn't even respond. She just says to the servers, just do as he says. Just do as he said. And each person has that kind of journey, from Thomas at the start going, I don't know how he did that, but I'm not being fooled by this. Like, okay, it was 600 gallons of wine, but I'm still not being fooled by it. Through to at the end of his section, where he's just seen it all close up.
Yeah.
I wanted it to feel like that, visceral, raw, real, sort of like unashamedly sort of irreligious at times, but also kind of like healing and beautiful. And, I had a message today, Belle, from this 75-year-old American billionaire who is chairman of one of the biggest companies in the world. Quite a hard guy,
yeah.
really. He's just a sort of tough guy. And he goes, I didn't know what to expect when I read this, but I've cried every single night reading. My wife thinks I'm having a breakdown. It's like, I don't know what's going on when I read this book. And it's like, this is why I wrote it, because it will change millions of hearts for the better.
I want to dig into some more of these characters, but first of all, Belle already mentioned it. We mentioned sort of Mary and Thomas and Peter, but that's not actually the names you use for them. You go for the kind of original sort of Aramaic or Hebrew or Greek kind of names. A very deliberate decision, kind of to avoid using the more familiar anglicized versions of those names. What's behind that? And you do it as well for like the place names and everything that's in the book. What made you want to do that kind of level of realism?
Well, two things. Number one, we're fighting this thing of like everybody's view of even the name Jesus is difficult for many people. I'm kind of like, I find when I'm in sort of really sort of Christian sort of settings of people, the language I really find sometimes difficult. Even like father, it's like father. If you say father to some people, it's like if you've been abused by it's like language is so important, and I don't think you can assume just because it's sort of religious language, people are great with it. And I wanted to kind of like, I wanted to start people on this journey afresh, from with no expectations, assumptions, start from the beginning. And also I wanted it to be accessible to, Muslims across the world and Jewish people across the world, people of all faiths. Because as you know, I mean, there are millions of Muslim people finding faith in Christ at the moment. It's unbelievable, some of the stories, and it's not coming from a sanitized Western smiley white muscular Jesus, so I kind of want to make it like it was. That's the other thing, is that's how it was. He was cool, Yeshua, I want to take it back to the beginning. And also the other part was, I think so many of us know that so few people know the whole story. We know stories. Even people who call themselves sort of the Christian faith, I would still say 95% of people who've never read the story as a linear story like that. We know maybe the Good Samaritan from a church reading, we know story of maybe a parable of the lost coins or something. We know stories, crucifixion, Mary, but to read it like that, and I wanted just it to be that. I wanted it to be a story. I didn't want it to be like, yes, this guy's a skeptic. This is Thomas. I didn't want that. I wanted, it's like, let's just start from ground zero and let it be what it is for people. And already, even though it hasn't gone out on sale yet, we've got probably about 50,000 pre-order copies that just ended up going out to like churches around the world and stuff. So it's sort of out, but it's not out. But the letters I get about that from people of all faiths already is like, it's like almost the church is so scarred. The world is so scarred. It's like we've got to go back. You've got to baby food to start with, and then let it grow.
It also, there's something about, I have lived my entire life thinking that the best way to make people take my faith seriously is to scrub out the weird stuff. And this podcast actually has really like rebuked me and challenged me on that. And there's something about the way that you use the regional language. It's something about that where I'm like, do you know what? How weird is it that this man, this carpenter from Galilee, right, the middle of nowhere, was so set in time and in place and in context. Like his feet were dirty and he had a bedtime and he had friends and he got cranky and yet he changes my life. Like, like the book that you've written, the way Peter speaks, that could be like my own soul speaking. So the weirdness of the fact that Jesus' story is so rooted and you've like really like dug into that and yet bursts out of any books you try to put it into. I think I don't know if that was an intention of yours, but if not, it's certainly a symptom where I'm just like, how peculiar.
That bit is the nature and the character of Jesus. He does it to us all every day, through many things, through this, through music, that's the nature of Jesus. That's beautiful. I think what I've tried to do is be really faithful to the story, and it is. That's why this is not really just my book. I mean, I work with an incredible team of theologians to get this kind of right. Andrew Ollerton, who we spoke, is like an absolute rock. He is the unsung hero on this book. At every page, at every paragraph, he was helping craft it, and he'd go, Bear, there's a 400-page book on just this encounter we're writing. We've got to get this tone absolute, and but it is
Yeah.
absolutely accurate. It stands up. It's been through so many sort of drafts, so it does stand up. But my point is this: the one thing I really didn't want to do is I only use the words of Jesus that he speaks. So I'm not inventing any dialogue at any point. It was sometimes so tempting just to kind of like, because I would lift these words out of different translations of the New Testament. And sometimes I think, oh, it's so tempting just to lead in bit of that conversation. Be so nice just to have a yes, but, or a comma here. I knew the one thing I knew in the whole process, resist that temptation. Don't even move a comma, so the words of Jesus speak for themselves. That's why they have that effect on you. That's just the words. That's just Jesus speaking to your heart, and that's beautiful and comes in many mediums. But it was something I really wanted to make sure. Two things: the story is linearly accurate, and the timeline of it and how it unfolds, and then his words are absolutely accurate.
Coming to Thomas, who's one of the five eyewitnesses, though, in the Hebrew, Toam, I think, is the name that you give him in the book. There is this journey he goes on, as you mentioned, from sort of, oh, that was just a party trick with the wine, to kind of then seeing these other miracles happen, and slowly he changes his mind. And you have this lovely line, at the end of his chapter: miracles convinced my head, love convinced my heart. But it's interesting because, in a way, that person is almost written, I think, for the modern day skeptic. In a way, there are so many people who probably are in that Thomas kind of place of, maybe there's more, but I'm skeptical, and all these claims about miracles and things. And in the story, in the chapter you give him, it's when he sees Jesus deliver a demon possessed man that he kind of, it shifts for him. I mean, what do you make of all of that yourself? I mean, are you an actually skeptical person yourself, Bear? Do you feel, have you seen that kind of miraculous stuff? Do you believe in demons? A lot of people will have those kinds of questions when they come to this book, because we live in a culture which is inevitably very sort of materialistic, and we think, oh no, all that stuff is kind of being explained away and that kind of thing.
So what are you asking me?
Well, I guess I'm asking, do you believe in that realm, I suppose, of good and evil spirits, and a sort of that it can be displayed even in modern 21st century Western society?
I think my answer is I think so. And again, there are many parts of things I'm not so sure on. There are many parts of doctrine I don't think I have the answer to. But what I decided long ago in my life of faith was that I'm just going to try and do what Jesus did. If he believes in this, I believe in this, and there's, if you look at all the things that people argue about over the years on stuff, and they're things that Jesus actually almost invariably never even talked about, so those things I'm much more like, I'm not really sure. But I think if you ask me about spiritual realm, I would say yes, I do believe in that. I do believe in good and evil. I don't quite know how to quantify it, and I'm not quite sure, how. But the story of Jesus, he had many encounters like that. I think what I focus on is on him. I just focus on the right side. I focus on the light. I focus on the good stuff. And, like my son was the other day traveling. He's quite tough, my son. Marmaduke, he's amazing. He's 6'4". He's just tough. He's non-dramatic. And he rang and he goes, I'm in this house in the middle of Africa, in this house. And there is a ghost in this house. I just know there is a ghost. There's doors that I'm like, you can feel it. The hairs on my back of my neck are up, and there is something in this house. And it's like, I could just say, you know what, whether it is or isn't, you are safe. You are safe. You are assured. And we prayed together on the phone. And I said, what a great thing. I can say, dear Lord, be with him. Put your angels around him. Let it surround him only in light, And that doesn't guarantee our physical life in the world, because many times terrible things happen. But our souls can be assured. And in that spiritual realm, I stand on things that are strong, and on promises that Jesus said that, that he is good, and with him we need fear nothing. And so that's what I do. I try and focus on the good stuff. And it was funny. The next day we spoke again. He said it instantly went after that. And he goes, the next day I spoke to the owner of the house who lived like a few miles away. And he said, yes, there'd been that many people said that there's been some pretty nasty stuff that went on there with voodoo stuff and, in the past. And it's like, well, there you go. So, but I don't know, many things I don't know. But the good stuff, like I said, I've decided long ago, if he's in, I'm in. And I'll stick to what he, what he backs and trusts and tells me to believe in. One thing of which, in this process of writing it, I got to read the whole Bible from start to finish. I thought no stone must stay unturned. I did it. And I learned this 365 times is the command in the Bible. It's a one command that is said over and over again. The most times it says anything in the Bible is this. It says, do not be afraid. 365 times, trust in the Lord, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. So that's how I try and live.
I can't imagine anyone who takes that as literally as you do, Bill.
Well, I have many moments of fear, actually, but I do try, still, despite the moments of fear, that's what I try and focus on,
Yeah, sure. As I was reading and as I've been talking to you, I've been thinking about that C.S. Lewis quote, super famous in Mere Christianity. He says, or I'm paraphrasing, but he says, listen, either Jesus is a madman, either he's a liar, or either he's everything he said he is. He's the Son of God. And so I was wondering, you've obviously just sat in the Jesus story. You've meditated on his words, his actions, where he went, what he did. And so I wonder if you sort of agree with C.S. Lewis. Can Jesus be watered down? Does he give us that option? Or can we only pick between him being a madman, a liar, or everything that he said he was?
Yeah, such a good quote. And, I think so many people approach just from not really knowing the story. This is the point. Most people, many people go, oh, he was just a great guy. He's a great teacher. And I get that. It's that's sounds the logical answer. But if you study the story in his life, like that quote says at the end, it says, don't give me any patronizing nonsense about him being a good man. He never left that option open to us. And I like that. But the thing is, I think I come to faith not from a place of... C.S. Lewis came from it of he was an atheist before and he studied it and he looked at it and he goes, the evidence all says, I can't deny this. The evidence all says. So he came from that cerebral place. I think I came from a place of I was in a tree and I really wished that God was real. And you can't conjure up God from nothing. You can't conjure up things. Well, maybe you could once or somebody, but not everybody. This universal sort of binding together that people of faith experience with Christ. It's intangible and inexplainable, So mine has always been heart-led, which has been I feel like Peter, as you said at the start of this, stepping out of that boat. It's this is where I want to be. It's the only army in the world where the safest place to be is on the front line. Every other army, you hide behind. The generals run for 15 miles behind home lines. The Christian army is the only army in the world. The safest place to be is on the front line. And therefore, for Peter, the only safe place to be was out of the boat, sinking a little bit, but trying to get close to Christ, trying to hold his hand. It's a lady with a hemorrhaging illness. Just all I got to do is fight my way through this crowd. All I got to do is touch the hem of his cloak. We will be good. That's how I try and live my life. It's I've seen a lot, I've lost a lot, I've struggled a lot, and I've feared a lot. But through it all, I've learned, you know what? I'm going to fight to get through and touch that hem of the cloak. And I'm going to stay out of the boat, stay out of the comfort of the boat, and I want to get close to the light. And that's how everyone's different, but it's how I consciously choose to live my life, unashamedly.
Just as we start to draw things together, Bear, the bit, obviously the book culminates, in the story of Jesus's passion, his trial, his death, and his resurrection. And that's the interesting thing about the greatest story ever told, is that some of those significant events take place over literally just a few days. And yet the thing that, interestingly, that again moved me in this book is often the thing that moves me most about the story. I don't often shed tears. For some reason, it's not Jesus' death on the cross that kind of brings me to that moment. It's actually the point where Peter denies Jesus 3 times. And it says in the scriptures, he went out and he wept bitterly. And I love the way you describe this in the book, but it's sort of Johann and John looking on him. And he says, Cephas, which is of course the name for Peter, was doubled over, crouched low on the ground, and he let out a muffled cry of pain. I knew what Cephas was feeling because I had felt it myself. It's the pain of failing those we love. And for some reason, like the image of this tough fisherman just bawling his eyes out, utterly desolate at betraying his best friend, that's always struck me somehow. It like really kind of gets to me. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know, we live in a world where, you know, a lot of people would look at you, Bear Grylls, and say, tough guy, adventurer, like that, you know, that's what a man is supposed to be. And they'll look at you know, this tough fisherman bawling his eyes out and say, that's not what men are supposed to be. But how do you approach that? You know, the whole question of the emotion that often we kind of, you know, in the male, you know, alpha male world kind of tends to be something that's off limits and not supposed to be talked about.
Yeah, but that's crazy, isn't it? And off limits is always dangerous. You know, with stuff you suppress is what always comes to bite you. You know, life is messy, and life should be light and shade, and it should have moments, as my life's had many moments of uncontrollable sort of weeping at times, you know. And at the same time, the flip side of that, there's a time to stand up and be strong and shoulder it and put your head down through the storms and fight through things. You know, it's like light and shade. Life is like that, you know, but what it doesn't need to be is a performance for other people. You know, as soon as it becomes that, our power drains from us. You know, it's like life is going to be complicated and have difficult moments, but also we are stronger than we ever imagined. And we have this strength inside that's given to us from the Almighty. You know, there are times to stand up and use that. You know, so I think it's light and shade. It's okay to have these moments of vulnerability and struggle. You know, I've had so many moments. You know, I hear you guys, both of you, a couple of times when you've been speaking, reading those little bits, I feel my eyes start to go. You know, it's like, it's just like the things somebody asked me the other day. They said, if you took Jesus on a running wild, which by the way, I did get to do. I got to take Jonathan Rumi this year.
Yeah.
And actually it comes out next year. It's epic. It's like, you know, and as you know, plays Jesus in The Chosen. So that was a cool moment. And I had to resist all the jokes of like, you know, I'll row across this river, you walk, you know, and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But
turn this rock into bread, that kind of thing.
Exactly. I'll get no need to go fishing tonight. And I did resist all those. And actually, what a beautiful guy he is, and he's had a real journey, because that's a hard shoulder, you know, thing to shoulder. But I think they said, if you really took Jesus, what would you, you know? And it's like, I know the first part, I'd just be on the ground weeping. That's just what my heart feels like that woman who, you know, like Mary when she washes his feet with the oil with her hair. You know, that's just, for me, one of the most powerful bits in this story. And the Pharisees looking down, and Judas looking, going, this is a waste. That money could be sold for the poor. And he's going, he knows what's coming. It's his burial ritual from her who knows in her heart. And she's just clinging on, knowing these days are limited. I want us every moment. It's like knowing if you're a mother or father, you're knowing your daughter or son is about to lose their life in a couple of days. You'd spend you'd use your hair to weep and wash their feet and be with them, and that's my kind of feeling. It's like, and then maybe we get through that and then go and have an amazing adventure. But you know, my point is, it is light and shade. You know, we have moments of struggle and doubt, and that's okay. And then there are times where we're empowered and we need to stand up and be strong.
Oh man, I love that you are so heart driven and in your relationship to Jesus, because I truly don't think that this book could have been written by anyone who wasn't. Because this book is written for everyone, but I get a sense that specifically if you've never engaged with the Jesus story before, this book is designed to pull you through it. And I don't think the way it speaks to the heart of the characters, and therefore the heart of the readers, I don't think it could have been written by anyone who hasn't journeyed, hasn't let their heart take the lead on their journey of faith. And so thank you, Bear Grylls, for so much, but for writing this book.
Thank you. I feel that I'm so proud. Like I said, the proudest thing I've done. I would give up every Everest summit and, SAS this or Emmys, or I'd give up all of that in a heartbeat. I've written 106 books now. I'd give them all up in a heartbeat. This is the only one that really matters. Everything in my career has kind of led to give me a foundation to be able to, talk about this stuff and put this out there. And it's to empower people. It's to help them find light and peace and love and strength and community in their life at a time where people are desperate for it. And, I keep having this like super clear goal that might sound crazy, but I want this to be read by every single person on the planet. The biggest selling book outside of the Bible and the Quran is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone at 250 million, I think. We're going to blow that out the water. We really are. I see it. I see people. I went to something the other day and I saw this little old lady walking out carrying 20 copies of it. It's like, I said, tell me. And she goes, well, my son is like, he struggles a bit with that, but I want him to, and his friend, he's got a faith though, but his mother is very good. It's like, this is why I say it's not my book. This is your book as much as my book, because there's never been the Jesus story at number one in the bestseller list. We're going to get it there, but I can't do it on my own. We get it because of people like you guys saying to our community, like, use this for good.
I mean, I had the same sense. I mean, I'll be brutally honest with you, Bear. When I got the book, I thought, okay, great, Bear's written another book. Let's see what this is about. And when I read it, I was like, no, this is a bit different. This hits different. And I was thinking as I was reading it, this is like perfect for X, that person there, that person who's just started their journey, that person who's thinking about this. It's just it's written in, like you said, such an accessible way, because it's written through the eyes of humans, if you will. It as Belle said, it speaks to the heart in that way. So yeah, we'll make a link obviously to it from the show, so people can check it out for themselves. But do go and check out The Greatest Story Ever Told. Bear Grylls says he would give up all the Everests, wild survival shows, and Emmys just so that you could read this book. So that's an endorsement if ever you wanted one.
Of course. I mean, of course. Brilliant. The other stuff is just stuff. This is history. This is his story.
Yeah, so great.
You guys have been
Brilliant.
so great.
Love it.
Oh, no. Thank you for chatting to us. Thank you for chatting us through this story. It's been a delight. And also thank you to you all for listening. I have no doubt that you are rushing to buy The Greatest Story Ever Told after that.
And we should also say thank you to the guest appearance as well. Now, those who just listened to the audio podcast won't have seen this, but Martha, the cutest little dog in the world, also made a brief appearance on Bear's lap as well during the course of the conversation, which was very, very sweet indeed.
I love it.
Reluctantly, we better draw this to a close. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to Bear. If you want to make future conversations, re-enchanting conversations happen, you know the drill by now. seenandunseen.com/give is where you go. But for now, we will say goodbye.
Thanks for being with us, Bear. God bless.
God bless. Thanks, guys. All the best.